Hi, everyone. Welcome to Ever the Wiser, your home for behavioral insight on how to address the climate crisis. I'm Meg Martineau, the founder of Ever the Wiser, where we deeply believe that behavioral science has a lot to offer in terms of solutions to climate change. Our mission is to disseminate relevant behavioral principles to those both inside and outside the behavior analytic community to make it easier for this cultural shift to happen. Our everyday behavior is going to change. It's going to have to. So we're committed to sharing our knowledge on how to make this process easier for all of us. It really does help to have an understanding of why humans behave the way they do in order to move forward in the most efficient way possible. Today, we're discussing a relevant topic that comes up when we examine why more hasn't been done to address the climate crisis. Spoiler alert, there is already a well established principle that helps us understand this. It's called delayed discounting. I'm super excited to dive into this because understanding this concept gives us direction on how to move forward. For those listeners who are BCBAs, this episode is available for a zero point 0.5 CE credit. You just need to pay attention to the secret code words in the episode and then head on over to everthewiser.com to put in that information so you can get credit. So pay attention to those secret code words that will pop up during the episode. Also, don't forget that a portion of our profits go to environmental organizations of your choice. We really believe in being the change we wish to see. So part of that world we envision is one where there's systematic support for efforts that are directly healing the planet. When you're checking out, you'll be able to select from a few different choices. Right now, there are 3 choices, and you can pick from one cause that helps promote solar installation in third world countries, one that focuses on conservation and planting of trees, and my personal favorite, funding indigenous communities in Brazil in their legal battles against deforestation. We're not financially affiliated with any of these causes. These were selected because they match the top 100 solutions to climate change according to Drawdown. We are so excited to have this option on our website. By getting your CEs through us, you're expanding your mind and healing the planet at the same time. Okay, let's get into the meat of this episode. Today, we're going to be talking about the concept of delay discounting and how it relates to climate inaction. Um, if you're listening to this episode today, I'm going to go ahead and assume that you deeply care about the warming of the planet. I can't help but think of when I was a little girl and I became aware of global warming. I vividly remember asking my father, why aren't we fixing this now? And his response still shocked me. Well, I'm going to be long dead before that happens, Meg. Like, excuse me, what? I still get emotional thinking about this because it's really at the heart of my frustration with climate action. Like, how can people not be doing more? How can someone like my father, who was a wonderful person, not be motivated to do something? Unfortunately, I know my father isn't alone. I'm sure many of you have had similar experiences with someone you know and love not being motivated to address the climate crisis. And there's a behavioral reason for it called delay discounting. Although our topic today is about climate inaction, it's really an episode about optimism and hope for the healing of the planet. Because on the flip side of this conversation, we now have more people than ever concerned about global warming who are motivated to act. Our numbers are only growing. Our agenda today is pretty simple. We're going to review what delay discounting is and give you a few examples. Then we'll end with what to do with this information. What are our next steps? What do researchers recommend we do with this information? Really, how can we move forward in the most effective way possible? So let's get into it. What is delay discounting? The technical definition from Hirsch, Costello, and Fuqua is that it refers to a decline in the subjective value of stimuli as the delay interval to access those stimuli increases. So let's break that down. What the heck does that mean? Well, according to Charles Catania in his textbook Learning, he's really a giant in the behavioral field. We know that reinforcement is more effective when it's immediate rather than being delayed reinforcement. And any behavior clinician knows this. You want to provide positive, ideally descriptive feedback right away after a target behavior occurs. This is a well-known strategy to reinforce behaviors and make it more likely that that specific behavior occurs again. But many times there is delay to when that feedback or reinforcement is delivered. So for instance, let's say I'm trying to teach my child how to use the potty. If his number one snack is chocolate, I'm going to give it to him right away after he uses the potty. But if I wait 1 hour after he uses the potty, it's less likely for that reinforcement to be effective. The same is true for adults. If I go to a brewery and ask for a beer and it doesn't get delivered until an hour later, I'm probably not going to be going to that brewery again. My behavior doesn't get reinforced within an appropriate amount of time, so that's going to impact how I respond to those stimuli in the future. So this is the concept of like, would you want $1 now or $5 at the end of this episode? Most would probably wait to get the $5. But what if it was $1 now, or $5 next week, or $5 next month, or $5 next year, or 2 years from now? At some point, your preferences shift towards the more immediate, smaller reward. In the experimental literature, there's been a lot of work looking at delayed reinforcement. When we jump to humans and studying their behavior when reinforcement is delayed, this gets into the territory of so-called self-control. So in this example, people who are willing to wait 1 year to get $5, they have much more so-called self-control than those who can't wait. Or put in behavioral terms, they can resist the availability of immediate reinforcement. Self-control, yikes. I know I don't have it. I mean, sometimes I have it, sometimes I don't. It depends on the context, right? There's plenty of times I set myself up with a goal and accomplish it. But there's also times when I fall short or when I wasn't able to follow through with a goal that required me to deprive myself of immediate reinforcement. I can beat myself up about it, which is really easy for me to do. I was raised Irish Catholic, guilt is in my blood. Or I could do something more productive. I could face the reality that my behavior was simply under the control of more immediate contingencies. When we break down self control from a behavioral lens, it's examining the relative value between immediate consequences versus more delayed ones. As humans, we are wired to behave differently when those consequences are immediately available. We're inherently more likely to behave respectively to those immediate consequences. That's why self control can be so hard sometimes, and why it's so easy to fall short if you set yourself up with a big long term goal that's unrealistic.
Hello, listeners. It's now time for the first code word of the episode. The first code word is air. 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 Pay attention for the second code word later in the episode. At the end of the episode, visit everthewiser.com to purchase your CEU. Thank you for listening.
Welcome back. There are plenty of examples of delay discounting and how we as humans don't exhibit self control. There are many times we engage in behaviors at the individual level because of access to more immediate reinforcers. The most common example is eating unhealthy foods or too much food if you're trying to lose weight or maintain a healthy weight. Say it's Halloween, you get a big bowl of delicious candy in front of you, but you know that eating too many Reese's peanut butter cups is not good for your health, but you just can't resist. It's just too good. The immediate feedback is just too valuable in that moment to compete with the more delayed consequences. Other examples include having too many drinks one night and being hungover the next day, or not wearing your sunscreen and getting burned the next day. So, delay discounting represents a process underlying sustainability issues in that our everyday behavior is more likely to be influenced by the immediate consequences rather than long term and arguably more removed consequences. Unfortunately, many of the behaviors that contribute to global warming don't have immediate aversive feedback. So, as you can probably guess, there's plenty of examples of how this relates to sustainability. And when we're discussing sustainability, it's really a broad field. There are lots of different topographies of behaviors and industries addressing climate change. When we reference sustainable or unsustainable behaviors, we're mostly referencing behaviors that contribute to global warming. Once again, Drawdown is a great resource if you're looking to get specific on high impact target behaviors. On a personal level, I've certainly engaged in unsustainable behavior, as we all have. But here are some of the more common things I've done, like I drive my car instead of biking or walking to work, getting a fast, quick meal at places like McDonald's instead of a healthy home cooked meal, buying my food at a supermarket instead of growing food on my own, saying yes to disposable straws after I order a coffee or single use items just kind of in general, paying the monthly oil bill instead of switching to solar. All these behaviors are easier in that they're less effortful and the positive consequences are immediate. If you're an American citizen, unfortunately, we live in a capitalistic culture filled with companies benefiting from the principles of human behavior. They make it easy and convenient on purpose. This is where I start to weave in a takeaway from this episode. Be easy on yourself if you're committed to making the world a better place, especially when you slip up. Shame and negative thoughts about yourself serve no helpful purpose. It's about the long road to creating the world we wish to see. Give yourself some grace. You are human. It's about finding behaviors that empower you to feel more sustainable so we can build this individual behavior change. But more importantly, we'll then be able to build communities that create large scale community and policy change. There's a Hirsch Costello Fuqua article from 2015 titled Analysis of delay discounting as a psychological measure of sustainable behavior from the Journal of Behavior and Social Issues. This is a well respected journal that has published a number of articles on sustainability that is a great resource for those of us interested in applying behavioral science to social issues. Hirsch, Castell, and Fuqua state that delay discounting is a measure of individuals' endorsement of long term consequences as opposed to short term consequences. And this represents a crucial behavioral process that underlies behavioral sustainability issues. Depicted here is an example of delay discounting represented visually from their study. Here they're comparing the relative discomfort for a water conservation strategy and a forced water rationing. Here, engaging in water conservation strategy like shortening the length of your showers would be initially discomforting but would lessen over time. And this is compared to the increasing discomfort of water forced rationing. So in the long run, we're going to face more discomfort for this than changing our patterns now. So this illustrates that a large delay between unsustainable behavior and long-term negative consequences is likely to have little effect on the behavior when more immediate consequences control an incompatible behavior. In their study, they outline how certain behaviors can be influenced by immediate consequences compared to delayed ones. On the top of this visual, we have some of the possible consequences to engaging in sustainable behavior. You'll note that the immediate consequences of sustainable behavior are higher response effort. The example here is growing your own food. It's high response effort, but the delayed consequences are pretty fantastic, including healthier options, less pesticide, better quality food, it's self-sustaining, the food has close proximity to where you live, and you grow positive self-talk comments about yourself. You get to tell a more positive story about yourself. Awesome. And on the bottom is the competing unsustainable behavior of going to the grocery store. It's lower response effort, but the delayed consequences aren't so great. They note that going to the grocery store makes it more likely to eat unhealthy food and spend more money. They don't list it in their study, but I'm going to go ahead and also consider the likelihood that purchasing food from the grocery store also increases the amount of greenhouse gases in the air because of the resources required to grow and transport the food from wherever it came from, and also the driving of you to and from the store to pick it up. The authors conclude that it's productive to consider ways in which we can reduce response effort of sustainable behavior. Another trick behavior analysts are pretty good at, reducing response effort. Response effort is exactly what it sounds like, making the target behavior as easy to engage in as possible. The garden example from this study hits close to home because it's one of my personal goals, to be able to grow more food that I consume. So for me, what's prohibiting this from happening? When I examine it from a behavioral lens, it's all about reducing response effort. And if I'm serious about this as a good behavior analyst, I need to start focusing on the immediate contingencies supporting the behaviors that I'm trying to promote. So let's get practical. I'm going to set a reasonable goal for myself, one that's attainable. In order to do that, I need to get an accurate baseline of what's going on. So for my family, we have a garden. We eat a variety of veggies from it during the summer. We always have a surplus of tomatoes and are frequently handing them out to neighbors. So one incredibly specific and attainable area for positive behavior change is to can tomatoes so that the surplus is available to me during the winter months. That's it. That's my personal goal at an individual level. I'm not going to set an unattainable goal that I would never hit, like eating all of my meals from my garden this year. I'm a little spoiled because I'm a behavior analyst and I know you can't change multiple topographies of behavior overnight. It's easy to set a goal. The real work is developing a plan to modify your environment to make sure you actually implement those goals. Small, attainable, and consistent steps are the way to long term behavior change. Now that I have a goal of canning my own tomatoes, it's time to do what Hirsch and friends suggest from their study. Lower the response effort. There's tons of ways to do that. So here I'm looking at what environmental variables can I change to make it more likely to can tomatoes. First, which I think a lot of people know about, is just to tell people. People can become prompts for our own behavior. Like your pesky husband asking, "Are you actually going to get around to canning this year?" Or a coworker that's also into gardening. Tell other people what your goal is. I could then also go a step further and ask one of these people to set a date to do canning with me. Lock it down in the calendar. I can watch easy how-to videos or short TikToks on canning instead of reading a long book about it. That's another way to lower response effort. And I could also ask for a canning kit as a gift for like a birthday or Mother's Day, some sort of life event. So the trick here is I get someone else to buy the materials for me. I don't even need to think about it. Another great idea now that I'm thinking about it is planning to use the product I make to give out as gifts. In this way, I'm lowering the overall response effort in my life because I'm replacing or swapping out another behavior, the dreaded shopping for gifts for every single person in your life, for every life event. Which, if I could just use these canned tomatoes every now and then I'm ultimately creating less for me to do overall. I love doing less. More of that, please. So now that I've kind of mapped this out a little bit, this feels more attainable. All I need to do is get the materials, which I'm sneaky, so I'm going to try and ask for this as a gift. I'm going to set a date for canning and tell a friend. I'm going to make it an event. This is just one example of what analyzing our behaviors at the individual level can look like. We can analyze our own consumption habits and work to develop contingencies that promote more sustainable behavior. I give myself a lot of grace, and I encourage you to do the same. I set small and attainable goals in the right direction. Once I hit this canning goal, I can then reassess and take another baseline to determine if there's more I want to change. I might quickly realize that canning more food is an unrealistic time commitment, especially since I'm a mother of two young kids, and that buying from a local organic farm is a better way to go. I'm going to look at all of this objectively and keep emotion out of it. I can tell you one thing. If I get to a point this growing season where I'm canning my own food, the positive self talk statements are going to be off the chain. I'm never shy about celebrating my own success by reflecting positively on my actions. It may sound a little conceited or arrogant, but doing this is actually like adding a little sprinkle of magic to this whole equation. Reinforcement is ubiquitous in our world, and it is the staple of behavior analysis for a reason. Reinforcement is how we strengthen behaviors so they're more likely to occur again. Never be shy about giving yourself credit for positive behavior change, no matter how small it may seem. It all matters. You're making the world a better place. Our pesky minds have this knack for focusing in on the negatives, but behavioral science has shown us that celebrating our successes is the key to promoting behavior change. So never doubt yourself. Instead, give yourself credit when credit is due. There are so many topographies of behavior you can look at through the lens of individual behavior change, but I'm going to shift your perspective and ask you to zoom out a little bit. Hirsch, Costello, and Fuqua already outlined behavior change at the individual level. They also point out to behaviors at the political and business level that influence sustainable behaviors. They note that policy decisions by leaders of production and resource allocation by businesses contribute to cultural contingencies impacting our everyday decisions. It's not just us acting at the individual level that will help contribute to a more sustainable world. It's going to require a two-prong approach, both bottom up and top down. Bottom up approach meaning consumers making change at the individual level through their own behavior change, which we've kind of already talked about at length, and a top down approach where pressure is made to alter policy and business decisions. If we go back to the tomato canning example, another takeaway from looking at these three levels of influences is, let's say I don't hit this goal of canning my own food this summer. It doesn't do any good to beat myself up about it. I'm operating in a capitalistic society where unsustainable behaviors are the social norm. Our culture is designed for me to be more likely to go to the grocery store than grow my own food. So learning a new skill and consciously stepping away from cultural contingencies also requires effort. This is where being part of a community, whether it's local, online, or international, and empowering each other to create broad scale community change and policy decisions is going to be part of the shift we will see. So, what do we do now? Now that we know about these three levels of influence and delay discounting, how do we get out of this delay discounting conundrum where humans are wired to be so sensitive to their immediate environment? The first step is to reduce response effort, which also really means examining the immediate environment for how to make it more likely to engage in sustainable behavior. Let's flesh this out with an example. Let's shift it up and discuss waste management for a second. And let's say we're trying to increase recycling behavior. That's our target. What are things we can do to lower response effort? Well, the first is to have recycling bins available next to each trash can. Just having that option will significantly increase the amount of recycling that occurs. Having that option available makes recycling easier. It's lower response effort. It also helps for there to be proper signage. Clearly marking what can be recycled is another way to reduce response effort. Those are the two most obvious examples, and boy, would I love to live in a world where there was a recycling bin next to every trash can with proper signage. That would significantly increase recycling behavior. Another option is to find people who don't recycle. So here, if you're looking at the three-term behavioral contingency, we're looking at modifying the consequences to recycling. In Massachusetts, it's illegal to throw away materials that are recyclable. So this can be a deterrent, but the trick is that you really have to have people available to regulate and enforce those fines. Other more repetitive ways to increase recycling are You could create community movement around this. Doug Mackenzie Moore is a master of this and has a book about how you can create community-based interventions to help heal the planet. So let's say there was a group of volunteers that was working on making the community greener, and you had a group of involved citizens where recycling was part of this community initiative. Pieces of this intervention could include having citizens sign pledges related to this, or having neighborhood volunteers that are available to answer questions around recycling, kind of like neighborhood captains, and also setting some sort of community goal that when it's reached, it's celebrated publicly in some way. You could also do something fun, like create a lottery where people who recycle or people who are caught recycling can win a prize of some sort. Positive reinforcement always makes things more fun. And we as humans, when given the choice, we prefer positive reinforcement contingencies. So, from my experience, embedding positive reinforcement into these interventions is an absolute no brainer. So, overall, there's lots you can do to influence the immediate environment to increase recycling. Another quite powerful strategy is to examine your language, or as behavior analysts refer to it, your verbal behavior in these situations. This includes vocally what you say and also what you say to yourself when you're thinking. So, really trying to examine the narrative that you already have around these certain behaviors. In Charles Catania's frequently referenced textbook called Learning, he reflects on how humans are better able to wait for longer, more delayed positive consequences. He states that humans can demonstrate self control in terms of foregoing smaller and currently available reinforcers in favor of larger and more delayed ones, but that these instances of human self control presumably involve verbal behavior. So our language is a critical variable here. Susan Schneider, who I consider an environmental leader for the behavior analytic community on sustainability, has a chapter in her book, The Science of Consequences, about this topic. She suggests that language, like creating rules, helps address when there is a delay to positive consequences to your behavior. And I quote, language bridges delays with helpful rules. Use your sunscreen, take your umbrella. Creating simple rules that you actually follow will help you engage in these behaviors more consistently. So, if you're going to the grocery store, create a rule that you bring your reusable bags. My rule is that I keep my bags in my trunk so they're available at all times. Develop a narrative in your mind about what you do in certain situations. That's a solid technique. Not only can you develop a rule around your behavior, but I encourage you to go a step further. Think about what are some behaviors that you engage in that are unsustainable. Surprise, surprise, you already have existing thought patterns when it comes to those behaviors. And guess what? If you want to change those thought patterns, behavioral science can help. Relational frame theory and acceptance and commitment therapy are behavioral tools that have a lot to offer here. When applied, acceptance and commitment therapy, also called ACT, can help shift our verbal behavior and our thinking so we engage in more sustainable behaviors over time. I preach this because I practice it. It involves a number of steps, and unfortunately, we don't have time to dive into all of it today, but it's got these juicy things like accepting your human nature, identifying your values, starting to ask these questions like what's truly most important to you, what legacy do you want to leave, and then developing habits, including positive self talk, to rewire your thinking. It also includes noticing when you're off track. So then it allows us to give us the space to commit and recommit to your values by engaging in behaviors that reflect your values. It's awesome. It's been transformative in my life. We're definitely going to have a topic for another CEU down the road, so keep your eye out for that.
Hello, listeners. It's now time for the second code word of the episode. The second code word is motion. 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 At the end of the episode, visit everthewiser.com to purchase your CEU. Thank you for listening.
As we reach the end of this episode, I'm bringing us to this Jane Goodall quote. The small choices we make each day can lead to the kind of world we want for the future. We are working to create change in a system that's set in its ways. Change is possible, but it does no good to beat ourselves or others up when we get off track. That's definitely not the solution. This will only lead to burnout and the worst possible scenario, extinction of our own sustainable behavior. I propose instead we encourage and praise each other for trying to do better each and every day. Let's not fall into the trap of shaming others for saying not eating vegan. What a terrible person you are. Instead, we need to find our own individual behaviors that empower us to feel more sustainable so then we can then promote even more change at the community level and help support policy change. Let's also give ourselves some grace when we slip up because at the end of the day, we're human and we are trying to change a lot. Let's support each other in creating the world we wish to see. Look around. If you're lucky enough to be alongside a fellow change maker, grab onto them, stick with them, encourage them, love them. Spend time building something up and watch the positive impact unfold. The world is waiting for us. Thank you for listening. I hope you learned something. At the very least, you now know the scientific reason we haven't acted more on climate change, and that's delay discounting. Don't forget that a portion of our proceeds at Ever the Wiser goes directly towards environmental organizations working to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. When you get your CEs through us, you're expanding your mind and healing the planet at the same time. Way to go, you! You can follow us on Instagram, YouTube, or TikTok. If you want to be on our mailing list of when new content becomes available and is posted, you can email us directly at everthewiser@gmail.com. Tell your friends, spread the good word, and reach out if there's any specific topics you'd like to learn more about. Take care, my fellow change makers, and until next time, keep creating those ripple effects around you. Be well.